Hello and welcome back to Rey's Gaming and more Monster Hunter Wilds. Today we have a bit of a discussion video for you about the difficulty of that beta and then the game in general. What's interesting about this concept to me here though is that there actually hasn't been much of a discussion around it from the community, at least not what I would normally expect when we get to play a game early like this. Normally say when we have a demo, there's usually some kind of, I don't know if uproar is the right word, but loud minority about the difficulty, some kind of conversation happens. And that's usually because the demos are really hard for one specific quest. So compared to that, how was the beta for you? What we're used to in those demos is much worse than this. Here in the beta, we had the massive map to explore with basically no real restrictions within it, which, really surprised me. Amazingly, we also had unlimited time. Like, even after you finish a monster, it was great. You could just keep going. The only time the hunt would just suddenly end is maybe you specifically chose an optional quest and posted that and went into it, finished hunting the monster, and that's it. But otherwise, it's just like free and open, very relaxed in its limits, where demos are usually at the other end of that spectrum. You have 3 specific quests in those, and one is a super easy beginner monster, maybe you got a mid-level one, and then amazingly, you'd usually have the flagship and that'd be the hard quest. So before the game's even out, you get to fight the flagship of that game, but under an intense time limit. 15 minutes the average to kill a monster. That's probably way outscaling whatever current gear they're giving you in that demo, and if you can't, you're going to have no time to actually kill it. Some examples would be Valstrax himself for the GU release, or Nergigante for World, or Magnum Malo with Rise. It was incredible, very hard because of the time limit and the limited gear, and just really fun. But obviously, because most people, I would say most people, wouldn't beat the time limit and that terrible gear during the demo, it would usually cause some kind of people talking about it. Some people would find that challenge too much, like they just couldn't do it, and maybe they go online and complain about it. Here in Wilds, I have seen so little to basically none of that, where we had Rey Dau as our big bad, but without the time limit, a way more free version. While we didn't have any big skills, we could at least choose from say 4 armor sets with a few useful skills in that mix. And we had a pile of options from consumables and the base weapons. They're feeling way stronger as well. Like for example, when I talked to Josh about Greatsword, he's never felt stronger with Greatsword while lacking the kind of key skills you usually build with that weapon. But is that a bad thing? Was this too easy? Like I said, I've seen very little takes that Rey Dau's a bad fight. In fact, that it was either too hard or too easy. For me, that's how I feel. They hit it just right. A fantastic fight visually, but also mechanically. The right difficulty level to learn the game and push your understanding of the new weapons, to kind of introduce you to the new way things are working in Wilds. It was great for me to jump in with my main weapons, relearn them, and then just take them to Rey and see how it goes. So I'm interested to hear what kind of times you guys got on your best runs. Like for me, my very first Rey kill was about 20 minutes long with dual blades with no carts. I was able to cut that down to about 14 minutes when I went back for another run about a day later, and maybe I could have got that down a lot more if I wasn't testing all the weapons and loads of stuff for content. But I would say, if I'm being honest, I would say switch axe runs were my worst. I think I got one about 16 minutes long. I had a weird time with that weapon and its changes. But say my very first charge blade run, that was 14 minutes off the bat, just because of probably how strong and smooth that weapon's feeling. If we think about the speedrunners with their near perfect runs, those scaled anywhere from 6 down to 4 minutes, just to reference the real potential that was there. So is that too easy? I don't think so. Like I said, it was just right for me to apply what I just learned about the weapon against now a proper monster. But on the other hand, something really challenging, like a special quest with a time limit and no carts allowed, that kind of thing, that would have been some extra fun on top. To take your mains that you're now confident with, maybe after a couple days of play, and see if you can beat it. It's funny because this actually feels greedy for me to say or ask for, with what was already an incredible, way more than normal experience for that beta. I think a main concern is just down to long-term difficulty though. Like I said, I think they hit the nail on the head for the beta. For 5 days of play maximum, that was perfect. But what about longer term? What about full game? When we have proper skills and upgraded equipment? Probably going to crush that content of the beta. So I do think it's very likely we're playing on high rank, and that's important to remember because the master rank versions are going to be harder. If Rey Dau is the exact same in the full release, I'm sure it'd end up overly easy, and I wouldn't want a monster as cool and as enjoyable as that to end up that way. So if there was a master rank version of Rey, how much of a jump will that be? I could see him with at least a few more moves in general, especially mix-ups to trick you, like he's going to slam with the wing but then he whips you with the tail kind of thing. Whatever new mechanics you could give him alongside more damage and danger and a faster pace overall, that'd be good long term for the fight. For example, you know that baby thundershot combo he'd do, where he'd fire off 2 quick, weak thunder blasts at you? Now imagine the supercharged one that might one-shot. Him doing that multiple times in a row, but not every time, would be super scary. So maybe he tricks you with a big blast from the air, only to then follow that with a wing slam after. But the next time he goes for it in the air, he does 2 blasts back to back, and the second one catches you. Obviously, he'd need some kind of visual tell to be like, oh, he's doing the wing slam this time, or oh, that's a double blast this time. But there's lots of ways you could enhance his base mechanics to be more dangerous to deal with, and that's because it's already a great fight. But yeah, I do hope to see like a master rank or higher rank version of the monsters, although that's fully expected. But aside from what might be in the full game, will we actually get more time with it before the release? Is there going to be a demo with, say, a hard quest before launch? Some people even talk about a second beta, but there's nothing right now to suggest that that's going to happen, only a kind of vague hope that maybe they'll want to test the updated performance before release again. We'll see. But I personally do have strong hopes for a demo, since they kind of always do them, and they exist long after the release of the game, you know, for the purpose of trying the game and getting people to buy the game. So I don't imagine they're going to break that routine now. But either way, I think it's fair to say that the beta difficulty was around where it needed to be. But for the full game, a bigger challenge is going to be needed and important, be that master rank or extra challenges within that. So here's the question: how hard do we actually want Wilds to be? I've seen on Reddit some interesting discussion around that topic at least. The general opinion I keep seeing is a classic one, that the first half of the game's life is maybe too easy. And then the second half, when you get the expansion, that's much more challenging. But then the opinion seems to vary if that hits right or not for different people. I think a great example of that would be World, where the base game had a few special fights here and there, but overall I felt more challenge was desired. While its expansion, Iceborne, was brilliant. The core lineup being great already, and then some of those DLC updates with new monsters, that was some of the peak Monster Hunter for me, with monsters like Elatrian and especially Fatalis. Anything that comes close to that feeling again is going to be a huge win for me. But on the other hand, if you look at Rise and the difficulty curve there, I found base Rise a bit too easy once I got comfortable with the wire bugs. But then, when you had Sunbreak, and that expansion there, they went too far in that direction maybe. I think back to the way they designed nearly every weapon to have some kind of crazy counter move, and then seemingly they designed monsters around that concept. Not only that, you had the scroll system on top, having you set up 2 different playstyles or movesets for one weapon and then swap between them mid-fight or even combo. That was such a potent, powerful concept, only for those willing to push their gameplay as far as they can and really try. And obviously the issue there is if you're going to give the player that potential power on top of all the mobility of wire bugs, then the fights need to kind of demand that you use it and so become much more mechanically demanding at a baseline. Quite a few, especially the last few DLC updates, they certainly were demanding, and for me, I absolutely enjoyed them the first few times, but I didn't get into it much longer like I would with normal experiences with Monster Hunter. It felt less like fighting an incredible creature with these potential dangerous things, and more like a video game boss. And so that's obviously a really hard line to walk for monster fight design. That's a big part of why Wilds has been so exciting and good for me. The new monsters and the way they work, their behavior, the terrain or the weather involvement, they feel like awesome monsters again rather than like a video game boss. So I'm very hopeful. But will they go into a more video gamey boss design again in Wilds? It's hard to say. I do think that was largely caused by, again, the crazy mobility and moveset options they gave us in Rise. So consider this more grounded nature of Wilds compared to that. You might think, oh no, we're fine. But then the roster of powerful tools that we have with these new weapons in Wilds can't be understated. We have clashes for any guarding weapon, the offset attacks for giving perfect guards being heavily rewarded compared to, say, guard points. There's new counters for a few weapons, multiple weapons get new perfect evade mechanics. There's crazy stuff like hyper armor for longsword, or the much better control we have to attack and move during combos. With the wounds, nigh on all of them are really impactful for the mini hold in place of the monster, interrupting what it's doing or extending your combo. That's really strong. I do feel like I'm less forced to play counter simulator, which is nice, but I do feel like we also have a lot of options and a lot more control over the hunter, which while it feels great, they do need to design monsters with that in mind, so it's interesting to think about. A real challenge for them. Now, we have no idea what their endgame system's going to be, but obviously we can expect one, whether it's going to be something like tempered monsters or the afflicted monster system, and the scaling difficulty through that. I'm not sure which would work better, or if they're just going to do something totally new, probably they will, but I will say I remember the afflicted monster grind in Sunbreak towards the end there, reaching kind of critical silliness at the really high levels, so I'm not sure I'm interested in that again. Now with Wilds, we see that they've introduced a star system that allowed one, say, balahara to be simply weaker than another on spawn. You could have like a 1-star chatacabra on the map and then a 3-star chatacabra on the map. Neither are going to be crazy fights, but obviously the 3-star is going to hit harder and survive longer. How is that going to play then into proper endgame monsters and their somewhat RNG difficulty? That's another interesting thought. So overall, I think I'd like the early experience to be harder on average in Monster Hunter new releases, and then hope that they can hit the right mark for late game and the kind of longer term challenge. We have seen lots of ups and downs with that concept, but there is something special about Wilds, from say the packs and the horde mechanics and the seeming intelligence of the monsters in general. Their designs, I feel, have been top tier, and honestly, some of the best I've ever seen. I have pretty solid hope for the potential of a demo, with maybe even arkveld under a time limit as the hard mission again, and we still speculate that we might hear about the demo and when it'll be at the Game Awards, if anywhere. But yes, let me know what you think. Was the beta difficulty good for you? Do you hope for harder in the full release though? And what do you think about the whole Iceborne versus Sunbreak difficulty design? But yeah, I hope this discussion is going to be a fun one. Please remember to keep it civil if you are going to talk about it in the comments. But we'd love to learn like what your kind of experience was like. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.